Welcome to this week's deep dive into Windows and Edge CVEs. Actually, you might notice there aren't any new Windows CVEs this week.
Yeah, quiet week for Windows. But we do have a batch of Edge CVEs, from the Chromium project, of course.
Right, because Edge is Chromium-based. Good news is they've all been patched. But even with the patches, some of them are still worth digging into.
For sure.
Especially the high-severity ones. And maybe some potential lingering issues, even with the patches in place.
Okay.
Like CVE 2024-1110. This one's marked as high severity by Chromium, so it caught our eye.
Yeah, it's an inappropriate implementation in Plink. A malicious Chrome extension could use this to get around site isolation.
Meaning an extension could access data from other websites, even with site isolation.
That's right.
Okay, so pretty big risk there since we rely on extensions so much these days. Can you give us some more detail, like how would this be exploited? What could be the impact?
Sure. So site isolation, right. That means each website origin gets its own separate process, kind of like a sandbox for each site.
Right, isolating them from each other.
Exactly. But this CVE, it exploits a weakness in Blink. That's the rendering engine Chromium uses. A malicious extension could, craft special messages or manipulate data, and that let it jump those isolation boundaries.
And then?
Information leakage, maybe even code execution on other websites.
I see. So even though it's patched now, it shows how important it is to be careful about the extensions we install and to really keep an eye on what permissions they have.
Absolutely.
Okay. Moving on, there's this known issue. It's been causing problems, especially for Windows 10 22H2 users.
Yeah.
It popped up after that September 24th update, KB5043131.
Right.
And it's causing applications with the UI access flag to, fail to start.
Yeah.
For users who aren't admins, at least.
Yeah, that's the one.
So applications that need, elevated privileges for accessibility?
Exactly.
Quick Assist,
Yeah.
Microsoft Teams, Windows Narrator, even... The problem is the integrity level assigned to child processes.
Yeah.
They're launched with integrity low instead of integrity medium.
After the update, that's what happens.
Yeah. And UI access applications need integrity medium.
They do.
So those child processes, they can't access sensitive system resources because they're running with lower integrity.
Exactly. So the applications fail unless you're an admin.
And you can see this happening with tools like Process Monitor.
Yeah, that'll show you the integrity levels of the processes.
Good news is it's been fixed in updates released on November 12th.
KB5046613 and later.
Yeah, so anyone who keeps their system up to date is fine.
Right.
But what about enterprise environments where updates are more controlled,
Sure.
What should IT admins do if their systems haven't been updated yet?
Well, for systems running updates before November 12th, Microsoft has a known issue rollback. KIR, they call it.
Right.
It's a group policy.
And what does it do exactly?
It basically undoes the specific change that caused this whole mess.
So UI access applications start working properly again.
Exactly.
So IT admins, they can deploy this KIR using group policy, and that'll fix it across their devices. Okay, so download the KIR, import it into group policy, configure the settings to target the right systems, and then replicate the changes, restart the devices, and it should be good.
Usually, yeah.
This whole thing, it really shows how even updates that are supposed to be good can sometimes cause unexpected problems.
It does. It's a reminder that testing and careful rollouts are so important to minimize those risks.
Right. So back to those Edge CVEs. We still got a few to go through. CVE 2024-49025. That's an information disclosure vulnerability. This one caught my eye.
Yeah.
What's the deal with this one? What are the risks specifically?
So this one could leak personal identifiable information, PII. If an attacker can trick someone into opening a specially crafted file, it's rated as low severity, but any leak of PII is a worry.
Right, even if it's not a direct attack.
Right, and it shows how vulnerabilities can be hiding in unexpected places.
Okay, let's move on to this next group of CVEs, starting with CVE 2024-1117.
Okay.
What's the story with this one?
This one, along with CVE 2024-1116 and CVE 2024-1114, they're all inappropriate implementations.
Okay.
In different Chromium components, file system, paint, and views components.
So basically coding errors or design flaws that make the browser vulnerable.
Right.
Could you walk us through the specific risks of these inappropriate implementations? Like what attacks could they have led to if they weren't patched?
Well, think of it like this. Inappropriate implementation is a broad term for coding errors or design flaws that create vulnerabilities.
Okay.
And in these cases, an attacker could exploit these flaws and compromise the browser's security.
Right.
So, for example, an attacker might gain control of the browser, steal data, install malware, maybe even take complete control of the affected system.
Got it. So these are real threats, not just theoretical ones.
Exactly. They could have been exploited if they weren't patched.
Good thing they are patched then.
Okay.
Okay, next is CVE 2024-1115. Insufficient policy enforcement in the navigation component. This one seems to be mainly affecting iOS devices. What's the potential impact, given that it's about policy enforcement?
Well, before we jump into that one, maybe let's wrap up this part here and pick up with CVE 2024-1115 in part 2 of our deep dive. So CVE 2024-1115, this one, it was a weakness in how navigation policies were enforced, specifically on iOS.
Okay.
An attacker could have, maybe exploited this to escalate privileges inside the browser sandbox.
Classic privilege escalation, huh? But how would an attacker even get to that point? To exploit it,
Right, good question. Usually it involves a bunch of, UI gestures, carefully crafted ones. The user would have to be tricked into performing them, of course.
Clicks and taps, you mean?
Yeah, clicks and taps. Manipulating the browser's internal state, like those old click here to win scams. But instead of winning something...
They're manipulating the browser.
Exactly.
So not a drive-by attack, but still risky if someone falls for it.
Yeah, definitely. And if it worked, could be bad. The attacker could bypass security restrictions, access sensitive data,
Okay. Moving on. CVE 2024-1113. Insufficient data validation. In the networking component.
Right.
What kind of risks did that one pose?
This one's a bit more technical. Potential for heap corruption. That's a memory mismanagement issue. Attackers can use it to control program execution.
Meaning?
They could, crash the browser, maybe even inject their own code.
Then run it.
Yeah. The vulnerability was because of a lack of proper checks on the data the networking component was processing.
So a malicious website or a specially crafted network packet?
Right. Something like that could trigger it.
These kinds of exploits, they often target the operating system, right? The memory management functions.
That's right. So they can be pretty dangerous and hard to stop.
Okay. Next up, CVE 2024-1112, another inappropriate implementation. This time of the printing component.
Yeah.
Is this another heap corruption thing?
Similar to CVE 2024-1113, yeah. But this one's specific to printing, so a specially crafted HTML page. Or a malicious print job.
Could trigger the vulnerability.
Again, potentially leading to arbitrary code execution.
Even printing can be dangerous, huh?
Oh, yeah. It just goes to show you got to do security testing everywhere. Every part of the application, anywhere you're taking user input or handling external data, that's a potential attack vector.
Makes sense. Okay, last one in this group. CVE 2024-1111. Insufficient policy enforcement again, but this time in the autofill component. How's this one different from CVE 2024-1115? That was also about policy enforcement.
Well, both are about policy enforcement, yeah. But CVE 2024-1111, this one's all about autofill. That feature that automatically fills in form fields with saved data.
Right. Addresses, credit card details, that kind of thing.
Exactly. The problem is the browser wasn't enforcing policies correctly. The policies related to accessing and manipulating that autofill data.
So an attacker could get around the security checks.
And get unauthorized access to your autofill info, your addresses, credit card details, all that.
Not good.
Rated as medium severity, but any unauthorized access to personal data is bad news.
For sure. Makes you think twice about those convenience features, huh?
It does. It's a trade-off sometimes.
Right. Anything else with this one?
Yeah, it wasn't a remote code execution vulnerability, so the attacker would need some kind of access to your device or browser profile to exploit it.
Still a serious concern, though.
Absolutely. Especially with that kind of data.
Okay. Looks like we've covered all the edge CVEs for this week. Anything else we should touch on before we move on?
I think we've hit the main points. It's important to remember, though, these CVEs, they're just a snapshot of the, ongoing security battle. New threats are always popping up.
So we got to stay informed, stay vigilant.
Exactly. A proactive security posture. That's key.
Welcome back for the last part of our deep dive. We've talked about a lot, but it really makes you think about just how complex cybersecurity is when you really get into it.
Yeah, it's a constant race. Always got to be ready for what's next.
Exactly. Speaking of staying ahead, let's go back to that known issue we discussed earlier. The one affecting UI access applications on Windows 10 22H2. It's good there's a patch, but it also raises some interesting questions about the update process itself.
For sure. Finding that balance, Between security updates and keeping things stable, patches are important, but they can cause unexpected problems, like we saw here.
And this one really affected people. They couldn't use essential accessibility tools.
Yeah. It really shows how important testing is. Thorough testing. And making sure old problems don't come back.
Regression analysis, right.
Exactly.
And communication is crucial, too. Microsoft did a good job, I think. They acknowledged the issue, gave clear steps to fix it, and then released the patch quickly.
Yeah, they did. Transparency and clear communication, that's how you build trust.
Absolutely. When problems happen, it's how you respond that matters.
It is. Open communication, clear action plans, commitment to doing better. That's what makes a system resilient.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up, what are the main takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the big thing is you need a multi-layered approach to security. Patching is just one part. You need user education, strong passwords, careful management of extensions, system monitoring. It all works together.
And most importantly, being proactive.
Yes. Always be thinking about the risks. Stay informed about new threats. Be ready to adapt.
Because security is not a one-time thing.
Right. It's a journey, and we're all on it together.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive for this week. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you next time for another exploration of the cybersecurity world.